Now we start the power on commissioning. Follow the steps recommended in the manual. Turn on the AC side circuit breaker. Turn on the DC switch, DC breakers of each battery module, and DC breaker of the battery PDU. Press the PDU power button to energize the batteries. Press the on/off button on the inverter's left side to connect the batteries to the inverter. The inverter can be powered by either DC or AC. When any of the grid, PV, or battery is connected and feeding power to the inverter's LCD display will illuminate. AC indicator illuminate when the power grid is fed in. DC indicator illuminate when the PV is fed in. Time sync, when enabled, the inverter's local time syncs with the cloud platform time. Beep, when enabled, the buzzer beeps for inverter fault alerts. Auto DIM, when enabled, the LCD turns off automatically after 5 minutes of inactivity on the LCD and buttons to save power. Factory reset, restores all parameters to factory defaults and clears historical data. Lock, when enabled, the inverter's key parameters are locked and unmodifiable. To enable factory reset or toggle, lock out all changes, enter password 7777 first to prevent accidental operation. Now start the battery setting. When the battery type is set to lithium, there is no need to enter the capacity manually. For max HAH discharge. With one battery pack, the maximum is 100 amps, with 2 packs, up to 200 amps. With 3 to 6 packs, up to 220 amps. Of course, you may set a lower value if required by the system. Next, the lithium mode should be set to 00. Once the setup is complete, if the LiBMS page on the inverter shows battery information, it means communication is successful. Then proceed to the work mode setup step. If you want to sell more electricity energy to earn profits, you can select the sell first mode and sell the battery power together with the excess solar power to the grid. If the wiring method is to provide backup power for the entire house, whole house backup, please select the zero export to load mode. If the wiring method is to provide backup power for part of load, please select the zero export to CT mode. If you're using the SDM120 CT meter instead of CT in zero export to CT mode, please check X_meter for CT. In the meter select option, choose EastRon 1P. Other parameters on this page can be set according to the requirements of the scenario. For scenario 1, whole house backup. Here, extra solar power is allowed to sell to the grid, but the battery will not discharge for selling. Solar energy is used first to supply the loads through the inverter. So, enable zero export to load, turn on solar cell, and choose load first. For scenario 2, whole house backup. Extra solar power can be sold to the grid, but the battery will not discharge for selling. Solar energy is used first to charge the battery. So, enable zero export to load, turn on solar cell, and choose battery first. In scenario 3, whole house backup. Selling to the grid is not allowed. Solar power is used first to supply the loads through the inverter. So, enable zero export to load, disable solar cell, and choose load first. In scenario 4, whole house backup. Selling to the grid is not allowed. Solar power is used first to charge the battery. So, enable zero export to load, disable solar cell, and choose battery first. In scenario 5, partial backup. Selling to the grid is not allowed. Solar power is used first to supply the loads. So, enable zero export to CT, disable solar cell, and choose load first. In scenario 6, partial backup. Selling to the grid is not allowed. Solar power is used first to charge the battery. So, enable zero export to CT, disable solar cell, and choose battery first. In scenario 7, partial backup. Only the excess solar power is sold to the grid. Solar power is used first to supply the loads. So, enable zero export to CT, turn on solar cell, and choose load first. In scenario 8, partial backup. Only the excess solar power is sold to the grid. Solar power is used first to charge the battery. So, enable zero export to CT, turn on solar cell, and choose battery first. For max solar power, you can limit the power generation of PV to not exceed the set value. When operating in zero export to CT or zero export to load mode, the inverter will draw the set value from the grid. This prevents unintended energy export caused by sampling errors. Grid peak shaving. The inverter attempts to maintain its power draw from the grid within this set value. Time of use. This feature allows dividing a 24-hour day into 6 customizable time slots for time-based battery power management and scheduling. In grid charge, you can decide whether the battery is allowed to be charged from the grid port during the current time period. And in GEN column, you can decide whether the battery is allowed to be charged from the generator port during the current time period. Time, third column. Only the 6th time period can cross 0 o'clock. The deadline of the previous time period is the starting time of the next time period. Power to maximum allowable charging and discharging power of the battery for each time period. BAT, 6th column target value of battery SOC for each time period. When the actual SOC is higher than this set value, the battery can discharge. When the actual SOC is lower than this set value, the battery needs to be charged. Select which days of the week to execute the strategy set by time of use. Now let's look at grid setting. Step 1. Click on Unlock Grid Setting and enter the password 7777 required for unlocking. Step 2. Select Australia for the grid mode. Step 3. Set the grid frequency to 50 Hz, and set the inverter output voltage to 240 volts. Step 4. Select the grid type. Set it to single phase. Other pages of the grid setting can maintain default values and generally do not require setting. Click the square root icon in the bottom right corner to save the settings. Next step, setup of GEN port use. We can explain this in different scenarios to make it easier to understand. Scenario 1. Only generator connect to the GEN terminal of hybrid inverter. Select generator input. If the generator capacity isn't big enough, gen peak shaving need to be enabled to maintain the power absorbed from the generator does not exceed the rated power set value of the generator. If using GS dry contact relay to remote control the generator, the following parameters need to be set in Zone 1. Start. When the battery SOC drops to this set value, if the GEN signal function is enabled, GS dry contact relay will close to start up the generator. 8. The upper limit of charging current when only using generator power to charge the battery. Gen charge, whether it is allowed to use generator power to charge the battery or not. Gen signals, whether to enable GS dry contact relay or not. Scenario 2. GEN terminal used as micro INV input to connect one or several on-grid inverter, and the generator is connected to the grid terminal of the hybrid inverter. Select micro INV input and enable GEN connect to grid input. The following parameters need to be set in Zone 2. Start. When the battery SOC drops to this set value, if the grid signal function is enabled, GS dry contact relay will close to start up the generator. 8. The upper limit of charging current when only using generator power from grid terminal to charge the battery. Grid charge, whether it is allowed to use AC power from the grid terminal to charge the battery or not. Grid signals, whether to enable GS dry contact relay or not. GEN forced to manually enable GS to start the generator once, without being limited by the start judgment condition. Scenario 3. GEN terminal is connected to the generator or left vacant, and the grid-tied inverter is connected to the grid terminal side of the hybrid inverter. Meter 2-inch and meter select is set to East 1P when using SDM120CT. When hybrid inverter uses CT and on-grid inverter uses meter, the wires of CT could be connected to the CT port of hybrid inverter, and the communication cable of smart meter can connect to the meter port. When both the hybrid inverter and the on-grid inverter are using smart meter, the RS485 communication wires of these two meters should be connected to the same RS485 bus cable, then connect this bus cable to the meter port of hybrid inverter. In addition, you need to enable X_meter for CT grid side INV meter too. Scenario 4's GEN terminal is connected to the generator or left vacant, and the grid-tied inverter is connected to the load terminal side of the hybrid inverter. Like the AC couple on the grid side, there are two options, CT plus meter or 2 meters. Scenario 5 to use GEN terminal as smart load output. In Australia, such scenes are relatively rare. For the system to turn on your smart load, two things must happen at the same time. First, the battery sock must be not smaller than the ON threshold dot. And second, this is the key part, your solar panels must be producing more power than the set value of power. On-grid always on, after enabled, the inverter will always supply power to load connected to GEN terminal when inverter operates in on-grid mode. Off-grid immediately off, when the inverter switches to off-grid mode, immediately stop supplying power to the load connected to the GEN terminal. Inverter ID series number, SN, of the inverter. HMI, firmware version of the LCD. Main, firmware version of the main control board. The alarm code and occurrence time are important information used for diagnosing and troubleshooting.